Meeting. I'm going to go a little bit unusual today. We're going to talk. I got to give a few comments. So first, I'm going to ask Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Blanton. Representative Bratcher.
Here in the room. Did you hear about?
Representative Cantrell.
Did you?
Representative Decker.
Present.
Representative Elliott. Representative Fisher.
Here in the room.
Representative Hebron.
Present in the room.
Representative Cole-Carney.
Present in the room.
Representative Lewis.
Present in the room.
Representative Maddox.
Present in the room.
Representative McCoy.
Here.
Representative Minter.
Present in the room.
Representative Mosier. Representative Nemus.
Here.
Representative Petrie.
Present remotely from my annex office.
Representative Scott.
Present.
Representative Stevenson. Representative Banta.
Here in the room.
Chairman Massey.
Here in the room. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. A couple of comments. By the way, congratulations to everyone on completing the first half, almost completing the first half of our session. Today is day 30. So congratulations to all of those that have trudged through this. Secondly, I want to tell this to our sponsors and to people that may be working with sponsors. If you are presenting a bill to this committee and you have someone that is going to speak on behalf of the bill or is speaking with a sponsor, please make sure that you go through committee staff ahead of time in order to get listed so that we don't miss anyone that wants to speak or address the Judiciary Committee. So that was my opening comments that I needed to make because we've had people calling me directly or calling my policy person, and we don't deal with that. Not that we wouldn't deal with that. We're going to refer it to them anyway. So to take out the middleman, please go through committee staff. Next, we would encourage you to put your phone on silent or airplane mode. The microphones here are very sensitive, which I get told almost every meeting to turn my microphone off because what happens is the cameras pick up and follow the microphones or follow the noise. So just be mindful of that when you're testifying. And if you're going to be at the table today, every meeting we have to tell people, please turn your microphone on. Just note that they don't come on automatically. There is a button there on them. Just touch that button and it will light up a green light and you'll be ready to go. We have actually 5 bills here today for consideration because one of the bills is really should be a very quick matter. Should be, I always say that as a qualification. But we're going to start today with House Bill 215, which is sponsored by Representative Fugit. So Representative, if you come forward, and I think Representative Riley, and you have a couple of guests that are with you here today. Mr. and Mrs. Bishop, if you would like to come forward. And as they're coming forward, I will say there is a committee substitute on this bill. Do I have a motion on the committee sub?
Motion.
We have a motion by Representative Banda and a second by Representative Fisher. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? There is none. This is a bill that we previously had scheduled on our agenda. It was taken off because we are working in concert with some other pieces of legislation that we're tracking along with this. This is a drug. Fentanyl is a drug bill that we're trying to deal with. This was brought by Representative Fugit in the interim. We discussed this, but we have another bill that we expect to receive out of the Senate at some point that will be a treatment mechanism for people that are addicted to these very deadly substances. So we're trying to run them parallel. We're trying to deal with this. And that's part of the reason we have a committee sub here today. But with that, I will turn it over to Representative Fugit, and you may proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Fugit, State Representative of the 84th House District. I have some guests with me.
Representative Steve Riley, House District 23.
My name is Rita Bishop.
William Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to be here today in your committee meeting, and to all the committee members, thank you. So prior to my coming to Frankfort from 1991 until 2013, I served with the Kentucky State Police. The last 10 years of my service with the Kentucky State Police was with the HIDTA Drug Task Force, which was a federally funded drug task force, and we worked mid to upper level drug cases that went from the hazard area all the way up into Detroit, Michigan, and other parts of the eastern United States. We dealt back then with substances, prescription medication, marijuana, cocaine, some meth, not a lot back then. But in those days, the drugs were bad everywhere, of course. But in the last little bit, the last few years, methamphetamine and heroin has made its way into the southeastern part of Kentucky, and now fentanyl has been introduced into the drug trafficking world in East Kentucky and all across Kentucky. So fentanyl is not just destroying lives, fentanyl is taking lives. According to a group that I met with from Operation Unite, the drug overdose rate was 56% higher last year than it was years prior, and 71% of that 56% was due to fentanyl involvement in the drugs that were taken. So the overdose death rate is higher because of this substance that's been introduced into the drug trafficking world. You know, Mr. Chairman, I know that we have in the past few years talked about reform and all that, but with something that this dangerous, there have to be consequences to those who traffic in these substances and put these into the streets of our cities and hollers of the mountains. There has to be consequences. There's dangers not only to the people who are addicts, but there's danger to those who are innocent bystanders in restaurants and different places that these drugs may be used. There's also dangers to the EMTs, paramedics, firefighters, police officers, and troopers that respond to the scenes of drug overdose. Last year there was a day or two period in Hazard where there was 10 overdose deaths or 10 overdoses due to fentanyl in Hazard. 3 people died. 5 people at that scene had to be triple Narcaned, and 2 police officers that responded to the scene of the overdose were exposed to the fentanyl, and they too had to be double Narcan to save their life. Fentanyl is not something to just smack somebody on the wrist about. Fentanyl is a substance that must be prosecuted to the fullest extent. House Bill 215 does just that. In Section 1 of House Bill 215, it deals with the importing of fentanyl into Kentucky, and the person that is found guilty of importing fentanyl, carfentanil, or fentanyl derivatives shall not be eligible for pretrial diversion. They shall not be released on probation, shock probation, or conditional discharge or parole until they have served 85% of the jail time that's given them by a jury of their county. Section 2 deals with a less trafficking person. So the first section deals with those who would bring in large quantities. The second section that you'll see we added in Section 2, Section 1 C, we added the amount of 1 gram or more of fentanyl, carfentanil, or fentanyl derivatives. Now, those that would traffic in 1 gram or more of these substances would also be required to serve 85% of their jail time. However, if a person is found to have less than 1 gram of fentanyl, they would still be eligible for a drug rehab facility. They would be able to go and be admitted to a drug rehab facility instead. Section 3 of the bill deals with the aggravated trafficking, and it lists of course it's already in statute, but what it does is this bill changes if it's fentanyl, then they must serve 85% of the jail time. And Section 4 is this act shall be known as Dalton's Law, and we have here today with us Rita Bishop, who would like to speak to the committee, Mr. Chairman.
And before
And I believe they're the guest of Representative Riley, so please speak.
and before they do, I'll tell you my involvement in this before we have Rita speak. In November of 2020, we got tragic news that a 22-year-old young man, Dalton Bishop, who lives 2 neighborhoods over from me, had passed away. And then as time came on, we found out it was a drug-related death. And at some point in time, after William and Rita had gone through the grieving process, and they're still going through it, obviously, but they called to ask if they could meet with myself and Representative Bart Rowland. Representative Rowland is an insurance agent. He has an office in Glasgow in my community, and William and Bart have been friends for a number of years. And I've also known the Bishops for a number of years. And when we met with them, we talked about Dalton's situation, and we had a long, probably 3-hour meeting one day and went over his situation. And Bart and I told the bishops that we would look into this, that we would look into some type of legislation involving this type of tragic death. Well, we discovered that Representative Fugate was going to file a bill to deal with this, and he's way more of an expert in areas like this than either Representative Rowland and I are. So we basically got with him, and he filed this legislation, and we decided that we would get involved to a degree, but would let him be the person that carried it because obviously he knows more. So I have stayed in contact with William and Rita over the course of time. Obviously, we were going to hear this about 3 weeks ago, and it was a tough call to call Rita and say they're not going to hear that bill. Because when Chris told me, I said, man, I hate to call Rita and tell her we're not going to hear the bill because they were anxious to come and tell Dalton's story. So a couple days ago, Chris told me we were going to hear it, and so I called them, and they wanted to be here. I told Rita that if she was uncomfortable, I would be glad to tell the story, but she wants to tell Dalton's story, and so that's why they're here today to do, and I'm going to let Rita do that right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The first thing I would like to do is thank Chris Fugate, Bart Rowland, and Steve Riley for listening and hearing our concerns about the rise in fentanyl deaths. Also, thank you to the committee that have heard our concerns as well. When we learned our son died from fentanyl in November of 2020, we knew we needed to do something but had no idea where to begin. So thank you all. Dalton took a pill that he thought was oxycodone. He took half of that pill. His autopsy showed us that half a pill he took was 100% fentanyl. Yes, our son made a mistake, but he had no idea what he was getting from a friend would kill him. I don't consider his death an overdose. He was poisoned. Just since Dalton's death, our eyes have been opened to how much of a problem fentanyl is. One of the scariest things to me is seeing the rest, but the guys are bonded out within 24 hours just to begin this all over again. Sometimes I wonder how our drug task force and detectives continue to have the motivation to press on. One of Dalton's teachers described him best this way. Dalton cared for everyone. In his short 22 years, Dalton did more for others than many will do in a lifetime. He was a hands-on Christian. He was sincerely concerned for anyone suffering from discouragement, unfair treatment, or difficult circumstances beyond their control. At an early age, Dalton had eyes that saw people that no one else noticed, and the heart that was fiercely devoted to building them up. Because of Dalton's example, our church has honored his memory by establishing the Dalton Bishop Least of These funds. I'll end with scripture that Dalton lived by, and we all knew to as well. Matthew 25:40. Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers or sisters, you did for me. Thank you all.
So that, Mr. Chairman, I would move that House Bill 215, as amended by House Committee Sub 1, would be passed from this committee if there's no questions.
We will have questions. Also, we have some other people that have asked to present. Before we ask the other people to come up and present, does anyone have questions for people? We've got a couple names listed. Representative Blank. Okay. Representative Ratcher.
Was that pill that Dalton took, was it a controlled pharmaceutical, or was it some kind of outlaw chemistry set thing?
I'm assuming it was not a pharmaceutical. I have not asked that question myself. Of course, at that moment, I didn't even know he only took half of it. The detectives told us at a later point that they found the other half, and it wasn't until the autopsy that we found out the rest.
Do they pharmaceuticate these things, if that's the right word, Chris?
There are obviously fentanyl that's sent to hospitals, but the drug traffickers from out of the country and in the country now are pressing fentanyl into pills with a pill press.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll add to that, and with Representative Bratcher, you know, owning pharmacies, I do very little. Fentanyl is typically end of life care, and it typically comes in transdermal patches. There are some compounding pharmacies that get it as well, but as Representative Fugate suggested, most of this is coming out of the country, in the country. It's being manufactured, and it's just such a powerful drug, and people don't know what they're taking. So really, you know, too often than not up here, we pass policy that is reactive in nature, and this is a very proactive response. So Representative Fugate, Representative Riley, and the family, I appreciate you all taking a stand on this, and it has my full support. Thank you.
Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a drafting question here. On page 2 of the committee substitute, line 3 and line 24, you delete fentanyl, carfentanil, or fentanyl derivatives. I understand what you're doing. You're moving the 1 gram of possession of fentanyl up to an 85%. But what happens to by deleting the other ones, what happens to the amount that's less than, what's the punishment for somebody possessing less than 1 gram?
In section 2, on line 14, any person who violates the provision of subsection 1, A, B, C, or D of this section shall be guilty of letter B, line 17. Any person who violates the provision of subsection 1, F of this section shall be guilty of a Class D felony for the first offense, and it'll be a Class D felony for possession.
So you're taking possession of less than 1 gram of fentanyl down to a D felony? Is that what you're saying?
Possession, yes.
Is that the intent?
That was the intent, and the reason for that, just so that everybody's clear, and I worked with Representative Fugate and the drafter on this. This is part of what I was trying to say earlier on. We want people that it may be incidental. Somebody may have given it to them. If it's less than a certain amount, then we want those people to be able to get into treatment programs. Like I said, there's a bill coming from the Senate that we believe will open the door for that. I know it may be a pilot project initially, but the goal is that people that may be just a user as opposed to a trafficker could get the help they need. There would be support for the family, support for the individual, treatment. And it's not just treatment. My understanding is the bill is going to go far enough to talk about getting them employment, giving them hope so that they can come out from underneath of this horrific situation.
But as I read that, you're keeping any quantity of possession of heroin, which is a lot less destructive than fentanyl, under the current 50%, correct?
Right now, when we did that yesterday, and I will go back and review that if we need to fix anything in that, I believe there will be changes to this bill anyway. The intent, we were focused entirely on fentanyl at the time. If we need to align it to cover other drugs of substantially similar, I won't know to say that they're not as deadly, but they certainly have a substantially negative effect, then we will address that. But without reading that today.
I am in favor of the bill, obviously, but I reserve the right to put an amendment on the floor.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And candidly, Representative Fisher, we expect amendments. Again, I'm working with Chairman Westerfield in the Senate presently. That bill has not been filed. We expect it may be filed this week. So we want to make sure that by passing this bill, we don't infringe upon what that bill is seeking to achieve, which is a treatment element.
Thank you.
Representative Decker.
I just want to thank you, representatives, for bringing this bill. It's very thoughtful, very well crafted. And I want to thank you, parents, for coming. I know I can't fathom the pain you feel, but I commend you for taking that and helping others and making sure that there is a way and a hope for others. Thank you.
Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. Certainly, thank you to Dalton's parents for being here. I know how hard this is for you to be here to tell a story. I appreciate very much the committee sub from the sponsors. I do think that it addresses the issue, the trafficking issue. We absolutely need to get fentanyl off of our streets. It's deadly. We're really not even seeing heroin that much anymore, not in our area. We're seeing it's pure fentanyl. And in fact, I have a friend who overdosed and died last week. So it's happening everywhere. The users, the individuals who are suffering with a substance use disorder oftentimes don't even, they clearly don't know what they're getting in these fraudulently manufactured pills. These are pill presses. Fentanyl, you're right, Representative Lewis, is not typically found in pill form. It's a patch. It's used in end-of-life situations. It's an anesthetic. So there is a use, but it is being illegally manufactured and brought into our country. And so we need, obviously we need to find a way federally to keep this from coming into our country in the first place. But secondarily, being proactive in addressing the true traffickers, I think, is important. I think the 1 gram provision allows individuals who have a substance use disorder to still get treatment. We know that a lot of times individuals have no idea what they're getting. Unfortunately, with fentanyl, they don't have a chance to even hit rock bottom. And it's critically important that we deal with it. I served as the Northern Kentucky Office of Drug Control Policy Director for a lot of years, and so I have seen the evolution of this, and I know how problematic it is. I do support this bill because it allows individuals to get into treatment, I think probably a clarification on the heroin is necessary. Representative Fisher and I had this debate a few years ago, and so I think this is a step in the right direction, and thank you.
Representative Nemus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Fugit, Representative Riley, thank you for bringing this bill. According to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, fentanyl trafficking has went up 1,890% since 2016, almost 2,000% in 6 years. We know it's killing our people, and so we need to go after the traffickers very hard. I want to make sure that the population understands what we're doing here. We're taking a little bit of different approach than what we normally take in Kentucky and going a little bit more to the federal model. And if you're a trafficker in fentanyl, we're bumping up your sentence to a C, which is 10 years, 5 to 10, and you're serving 85%. And I think as one of the criminal justice reformers, that is perfectly appropriate for traffickers. You need to be serving. You need to be serving a long sentence. You are, in the language of the law, knowingly killing our people, and that needs to stop for traffickers. I've got a question, Representative Fugit, because as Representative Moser said, we want to make sure, and I know you do too, we've talked, that people who are addicts get treatment and people who are traffickers get sent to prison for a long time. And that's what this bill does. But my question is, and I should know this, but I'm not a state trooper, former state trooper like you are, how much is a gram of fentanyl, and does that appropriately delineate the user from the trafficker?
I can tell you this, that a gram of pure fentanyl would kill everybody on that panel. 1 gram of fentanyl would kill everybody up there.
And is there
just a small amount? So, the such as the case probably with the bishop's son, had maybe never taken fentanyl, and just that half a pill killed him. On the street, most of the time it's mixed with something else, and they'll have just a very small amount of fentanyl put in that drug usage. A gram is, and again, I've been gone from the state police 9 years. A gram of cocaine on the street was $100. I don't know what the street value is now. Fentanyl, I would say, is probably around. Methamphetamine was $100 a gram back then, and Representative Blanton could affirm that, I'm sure. But and I don't know I don't know what the price is today, but a gram of pure fentanyl would kill more than one person. This gram this gram that this bill's talking about is a fentanyl derivative.
According to what I've read, the price for the gram on the street right now is $200, which is almost 3 times a gram of gold. My question, I looked into this a lot yesterday, but I'm not an expert on fentanyl, and because I don't want to over criminalize usage. Those people need to be held accountable, but we need to get them treatment. Traffickers, totally different ballgame. But I'm going to make a statement, Representative Fugate, and make sure I'm right about this. My quick studies have shown to me that if we're talking about a gram of fentanyl, that's not something that you can accidentally pass along. So here's my fear, and I think I'm okay. Person that's trafficking, bad guy, really bad guy, gives to somebody else, a user, some drugs that have fentanyl in them. And then I don't want that person who's using with a friend. I want them to be held accountable and get treatment, but I want them to be in prison for 10 years and have this enhanced penalty put on them. I want that on the trafficker. But here's what I think I've learned. You can't accidentally use it or accidentally forward it along with a gram of fentanyl. You will know that has fentanyl in it. Is that a fair statement?
I would think that's a fair statement. So what happens in our experience is if there's 2 drug dealers living within 4 or 5 miles of each other in the hollers, and they're both selling meth or whatever, and one of them gets a little bit, he wants to get more customers, then he'll put a little fentanyl or have some put in his stuff, so it makes it stronger. So he takes all the customers from this guy, and then the other trafficker will figure out what he's done, and then he'll add a little bit more to his. And so what happens on the street? They think they're scientists or chemists, and they begin to be in competition, and then they ultimately put too much fentanyl in. Now, I'm not saying they're doing that at the very local level, but wherever they're getting it at or from, whether it's in-state or out-of-state, they're the true big league traffickers are mixing that with it, so it gives them a more potent supply, so that they will get more people to come to their business.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question first, and then probably a second question, if I may. One, I'm looking at the impact statement, and if I'm reading this correctly, about 207,000, a little over 207,000 per each inmate additional cost that's subject to the penalties in this legislation proposed. Is that correct?
The fiscal note that I saw was greater than $1 million, I think. I don't know if it was broken down to individual inmates or not.
Yeah, what I'm seeing on the second page of that, dated February the 2nd, says the additional number of days under this proposal would translate into an additional cost of over $207,000 per inmate. Now, I don't know how many inmates will be subject to this, but that's the cost of it. That doesn't mean yay or nay on the bill. I'm just trying to make sure I understand that metric for consideration purposes.
Right.
Still looking at that, and I'll talk to you later. Mr. Chairman, may I ask one more question on a drafting issue?
Yes, you may, and I will tell you, Representative Petrie, that my understanding is that impact statement came out before the committee sub, so that will have some impact.
Understood. I appreciate that. Thank you. Representative Fugate, I'm looking at section 2, section sub 1, sub C. You've got 1 gram or more of fentanyl, and I think I'm looking at the proper committee sub, 1 gram or more of fentanyl, carfentanil, or fentanyl derivatives.
Yes.
My question is to make sure that I'm understanding your intent. So would it be 1 gram of fentanyl? Stop. 1 gram of carfentanil? Stop. 1 gram of fentanyl derivatives? Stop. Or 1 gram of a combination of these 3?
Right. Yes.
If it's intended to be a combination, we may want to look at the drafting on that just to make sure we're catching it appropriately. As defense counsel, I think I would look at that and argue that it's 1 gram of each one of those.
All right. Thank
or
you.
alternative of those, but not combinations. Just making sure, though.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We also have a few people that have signed up to speak, but I think 4 of them are from one entity. So if they could come forward, we'll have one person speak on behalf of the ACLU. And then I believe that there was somebody from the Kentucky Policy Center, Carmen Mitchell. Is that correct? and Carmen, if you could come forward. We are going to have to limit you to about 3 to 5 minutes tops because we have 4 other bills today. We knew this would take some time, so we prepared for that, but just so you're mindful of our time constraint. Please introduce yourself and then your agency and then proceed.
My name is Kungo Jaguna, and I'm a policy strategist with the ACLU of Kentucky. And just so I understand, you're only going to let me speak. And
I'm only going to let one speak
Okay.
that's from the ACLU and then one speak from Kentucky policy just because of time constraints and because this is a process, and there will certainly be other opportunities along the way to raise comments and concerns.
I appreciate that. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Massey and members of the committee. As I said before, my name is Kungo Jaguna, and I'm a policy strategist with the ACLU of Kentucky. But more importantly here today, I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I'm here today to talk to you about House Bill 215. First, I do want to acknowledge Representative Fugate's willingness to speak to me, and talk about language and potential changes. I know, like me, his goal is to save lives. We know what opioids and fentanyl are doing to our citizens. Him and I just really disagree on the best way to get there. What this body has done and what the General Assembly has done is to pass new laws or enhance penalties, but those don't work. In fact, in Section 1, if we take a look at KRS 21A.140, that's a relatively new law. You guys passed that in 2015, and it was targeted at heroin only. And that year, unfortunately, we had 1,248 Kentuckians overdose. So 2 years later, we came back and we amended it in 2017 to add carfentanil, fentanyl, and fentanyl derivatives. In 2017, we had 1,565 Kentuckians die of overdoses. So here we are in 2022 looking to amend the law again and enhance penalties. But in 2020, we had 1,964 overdoses. And in last year, we had the 4th highest rate of increase in overdoses, according to the CDC, with over 2,200 of our brothers and sisters dying from overdoses. Enhanced penalties don't work. They don't work. Only treatment does that. That is what we need to be focusing on. In his second book, Sam Quinones, entitled The Least of Us, The True Tales of American Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth, talks about the age that we are in today, synthetic opioids. And what he says after he travels the country, including Kentucky, is that after seeing that our only hope, he writes, our best defense, perhaps our only defense, lies in bolstering community. Community equals recovery. I am here today because I found recovery. I used to inject meth, heroin, and only God knows what. Because as you said, fentanyl is in everything and you don't know it's there. But I'm here today because I got sober. And just to continue what he said, like the pandemic, fentanyl and methamphetamine present us with a huge opportunity for change. They are calling on us to embrace the ignored, the forgotten, and the despised around us. Allow them space, recovery, so they may unlock their energies and abilities. When they do, like a natural resource, they will push us all forward. I'm a user, and I was an addict. And when I look at laws today, I go, would this capture my conduct? I wasn't a trafficker. I wasn't an importer. But I live on a border county, and I would typically go over across and get what I needed to get. And there are other people like that. Because it's any amount, I'm an importer. And even for your trafficking for 1 gram, that sounds like a lot, but the law also says that the transaction doesn't have to be one. It can be done over 90 days. Sometimes you buy a point or two, then the next day you buy some more. That adds up to a gram pretty quick. You capture my conduct. You're not saving lives. Here's what we need to do. And instead of focusing on the substance, what we've done, what did we do? Years ago, we cracked down on pills. On prescription pills, we saw the rise of heroin. We crack down on heroin. We see the rise of fentanyl and meth. In the age of synthetic opioids, the next drug is being concocted somewhere, made up, probably not even in this country. Instead of focusing on the trees and trying to cut that down, we need to focus on the forest of addiction and focus on community and the individual and help him or her get out of that. If we do that, we'll save lives. And this bill doesn't do that. And that's why I encourage each of you to vote no. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mitchell.
She's right there.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Mitchell, you may proceed and just trying to move things along.
Yes. Okay. Is this on? Yes. Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. I just first want to thank Chairman Massey and all the members of the committee for allowing all of us the opportunity to speak on this. Chairman Massey in particular, is very nice to see you in person. I just want to say I am a criminal justice researcher with the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. I'm also a public health researcher and a lifelong Kentuckian who is as deeply concerned about the health and welfare of all Kentuckians as all of you. Kentucky is one of the most incarcerated places in the world already. I'm sure many of you know that, especially those of you who get emails from me all of the time. But it is worth repeating that we have an incarcerated population larger than the size of Paducah. Kentucky is also one of the states that has been hit hardest by the opioid health crisis. And despite over a decade of drug felony bills, as my friend Kungo was just talking about, Kentucky remains among the top 10 states with the highest overdose death rates. HB 215 will not help to address this crisis, but will instead cause further harm by requiring people to stay in prison even longer. Excuse me. Importing of or trafficking in any quantity of carfentanil, fentanyl, or fentanyl derivatives is already subject to harsh punishments in Kentucky, as we've already talked about today. Extending the required sentence served from 50% to 85% will not serve as a deterrent to using and distributing fentanyl, because research shows that increased criminal penalties don't work to deter people from committing offenses. Many people who commit crimes are not aware of the punishment or sentence that it is for the crime, because not most people, unfortunately, spend a lot of time reading statutes like I do. And for even people who are aware, there may be a diminishing shock value of long sentences becoming even longer. Extending sentence lengths for fentanyl can also potentially exacerbate what are already very serious current racial disparities in sentencing and incarcerated populations in Kentucky. According to a 2020 report, 75% of people serving federal sentences for trafficking fentanyl were people of color. It's also important to note, because we've talked about this today, harsh penalties aimed at punishing drug kingpins to take down organized systems very rarely achieve this goal. There's a great deal of overlap between people who sell drugs and people who use drugs, and these are the people who are, by and large, the ones who end up incarcerated under these statutes, not the kingpins the statutes are purportedly designed to punish. Even with the substitute, our understanding is that this criminal law will still capture a lot of people who are just users who are trying to help, not traffickers. The Kentucky General Assembly should not pass HB 215 and instead work to reverse criminal penalties, which are already quite severe. Research has increasingly shown that locking people up for longer does not make communities safer, but does increase the likelihood of people losing their jobs, their homes, and their children, and experiencing other forms of financial hardship, things that exacerbate substance use disorder and overdose. Instead, the General Assembly should implement policies and fund programs to actually address substance use disorder, such as expanding mental and behavioral health treatment access, like what the reported SB 90 is trying to do, the upcoming bill. And we should also be looking to continue to expand opportunities for people to be diverted to treatment at the pretrial stage and ensure people have access to critical supports they need to thrive, such as housing and transportation. That is why I am asking you not to support HB 215. And my final note is, I know I'm out of time, but I've mentioned a lot of research today, so if anybody wants access to that research, I'm happy to send any of the information we've used in this analysis to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Blanton, I wanted to circle back to you because you indicated until it was all presented, you didn't have a comment, so you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. and Mrs. Bishop, let me take an opportunity to thank you all for being here today, for sharing your story of your loss, and you have my heartfelt sympathies and condolences. No family should lose a loved one to something like this. Apparently, in this country, we are moving towards living in a utopia. The fact of the matter is, drugs like fentanyl are deadly, and people who are poisoning our children, like the bishops, deserve to be in prison, incarcerated for it. I fully support treatment of those that are abusers of drugs. They need opportunities. I spent about 7 years of my life living daily with people who traffic in drugs, eating with them, hanging out with them, buying their drugs. I know what they think. We want to paint a picture of them as victims. They know what they're doing. They're not victims as society is trying to portray them as today. They act like they're victims once they're caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and all of a sudden it's, oh, so woe is me. How many of our children do we have to let die because some people don't want to wake up to the reality of what's going on in this country? How many? How many do we let die? I've had friends that's died. I've had families that's friends of mine, and their children have died from this stuff. Instead of wanting to actually do something about it, we want to let everybody out of jail. Oh, poor old them. They didn't mean any harm. Well, they may not have, but that don't bring the bishop's son back. Every life matters. I don't care where you come from. I don't care about your race or your creed. Every life matters. It's up to us as a society to protect one another. This movement that's going on in this country is exactly why our larger cities are seeing exploding crime rates. That's why we're seeing shootings of our innocent children taking place every day. And then I want to hear people come in and they want to pout about, oh, the poor old this one, the poor old that one, and they want to humanize them. Well, folks, we've tried for decades in this country to rehabilitate people. How's that working out? About 18 months ago, I was in Spain, in one of their largest cities. Very clean, felt very safe, whether I was on the subway, whether I was in a cab, didn't matter. And I was talking to a local one day, and I said, how is it that your city is so safe here, so clean, and we feel so safe? And his response to me was, we have a very swift and harsh justice system, and people have a fear of committing crimes. Folks, prison was intended to punish people. We've taken the fear away from them. They no longer fear their actions and what will become of them if they commit crimes. We no longer call them criminals. We call them fathers, sons, whatever name you want to apply to them, to humanize them. Most of us live in communities that are not impacted by it. I get calls from people when a drug dealer moves into their community. They don't want them. You don't want them. If you think these people are so innocent and so kind, how about you rent them out a room in your house and let them stay with you? Don't see that happening. Don't see that happening. This is a bill to put traffickers behind bars, to get them off our streets, to prevent them from killing our children. How in the world that you could think that that is anything less than that, than protecting the people of our society, then I must wonder. Folks, the days of getting soft on crime and being sympathetic, and I'm sympathetic to people, and I can tell you this because I've seen it in my own family. You want people to want to get cleaned up that are drug abusers, they're going to have to hit rock bottom before they're going to decide they want to get cleaned up. And sometimes that means getting charged with a crime. That's what happened with my family. They had to get charged with a crime before they get cleaned up. They weren't traffickers, they were users, but they had to hit rock bottom. People, the conversations have to stop on getting softer on crime, and we have to adhere to the rule of law to protect the citizens of this Commonwealth. Yeah, we got a high incarceration rate. You know why we have a high incarceration rate in this state? Because we got a lot of people committing crimes. If they're not committing crimes, if they're not creating victims, and we're forgetting about the victims in all this. What about the victims of these crimes? What about the bishops? What about the ones we had come in and testify during our interim that lost their loved ones when someone got bailed out that should have never been bailed out, and their son was shot walking home from the hospital? What about those people? Now, you people can live in your utopia, but I'm not on your side. I'm going to fight to ensure that we maintain law and order in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Nemes, I'm going to have to ask you to be quick, and this will be the last comment. We'll have to wrap up this bill and move on.
I'll try to be quick, but I think this is mighty important.
Understood.
I think one of the tragedies of my 6 years in the General Assembly is when Dismas Charities, a drug treatment outfit, comes to meet with me, and Representative Blanton and I are really close. But when Dismas Charities comes to meet with me, they don't say what they should be saying, which is we've got people sleeping on the floors in the gym. They say we have empty beds. That is immoral. That is a failure of leadership. That's a failure of the legislature, a failure of the executive. We are failing our people. And while this bill I'm for, because I think it distinguishes between what is a trafficker and what is a user, which is what we're trying to do. But I must respond to one thing that my good friend John Blanton said. We're trying to treat people. How does that work? I'll tell you how it works for my family. I have a sister who's 6 years younger than me. She's been on drugs since she was 16 years old. I'm 43, she's 37. She got treatment, and now she's raising her 3 boys, my 3 nephews. My mother raised those boys until she got better. She was in and out of God knows where. We were thankful when she was in jail. On one Thanksgiving night, I remember, because we knew what she wasn't doing with her body, what she wasn't doing with herself, and that she was going to be safe that night. She got treatment, and she's raising Ray, she's raising Ben, and she's raising Jack. We talk about victims. There are victims everywhere, no doubt. Innocent victims. But Ray, Ben, and Jack were also victims. And treatment is what brought their mother home. My sister home. Treatment is what we need. We definitely need to go after the traffickers, and that's what this bill's trying to do. But to say that we need to throw Lauren's life away, or to say that we don't need to humanize my sister, is wrong. Her life is valuable. Ray, Ben, and Jack are victims, and their lives are valuable. So I challenge this General Assembly. Stop saying treatment. Fund it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Last word, Representative Riley. You said very small, so last
very
word.
short. Yes, sir. I commend the gentleman from the ACLU who went through rehab, and I'm glad that his life is in order and he's trying to do productive things. But this bill deals with people going through rehab. It has a component to that. But Dalton Bishop doesn't have a chance to go through rehab because of what a trafficker did. He doesn't have a chance to do that. His mom and dad don't get to see him anymore. because of what a trafficker did. And I think that's something that we need to realize in this bill, that it takes care of people going through rehab, but we have to deal with traffickers. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say one thing, just to respond to what they said about looking at the person. So I'm not always up here trying to make laws to put people in prison. I spend my life every day that I'm not here helping people who are addicted. If you go to my church tonight at 7 o'clock, there'll be a guy there that was a meth cook, homeless, came to our church. His life's changed. He's one of the best men I got. My Sunday school teacher for the adult class Sunday morning is a recovering alcoholic. He's changed his life. God changed his life. The guy who does our recovery meeting on Tuesday night is a recovering opioid addict. I spend my life trying to help people who are addicted. But I have no sympathy for somebody who would take a poison substance and sell to my people and the people that I love in my communities. I'm for helping every addicted person they are. But I have no sympathy for those who traffic, and there must be consequences that is substantial to keep people from doing it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we need a motion on the bill. We have a motion by Representative Banta, second by Representative Bratcher. Madam Secretary, please call the roll. This is a bill, just so we're clear, this is for approval of House Bill 215 as amended by the House Committee Substitute.
Representative Banta,
Yes.
Representative Blanton,
Aye.
Representative Bratcher,
Yes, and just briefly, I'd like to say that drugs are a large spectrum anymore, and different drugs get caught up into the discussion. This fentanyl is deadly drugs. Heroin, opiates are deadly drugs. There are other drugs that we are criminalizing that are not deadly. And so I hope that we will shift our attention to these deadly drugs. I mean, we're trying to ban kratom now, I heard. I mean, we got to keep our eye on the ball. Some of these drugs are deadly, and we need to get them off the street and punish the ones dealing with them. But we need to make sure that our eye is on the ball on which drugs are that way. So, yes.
Representative Cantrell, Representative Decker,
Yes.
Representative Elliott, Representative Fisher,
May I explain my yes vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In this bill, we are not talking about users or possessors of drugs. We're talking about importers and traffickers of these deadly drugs. Many of these deadly drugs, because they take them, or they've been given these, or they've purchased these drugs and taken them, they cannot be helped. They will easily overdose on 1/1,000,000th of 1 gram of carfentanil, for instance. So I'm in favor of this bill, making it an 85% service time for trafficking in 1 gram or more of fentanyl or fentanyl derivatives. But I'm not in favor of reducing the trafficking of smaller amounts of fentanyl, carfentanil, to a Class D. So thank you.
Representative Heverin,
Yes.
Representative Kulkarni,
Briefly explain my vote. I want to thank the sponsor of this bill. I want to thank the bishops for traveling and sharing their story. I'm going to vote no on this bill. That does not mean I don't understand the intent and the instinct to go after people that are trafficking in these substances that are deadly, that are killing our communities. My concern is, and I would like to reiterate a phrase from Mr. Jaguna, whose conduct are we capturing? We've heard that increasing penalties does not actually deter overdoses. And are we actually capturing the individuals that we want to capture, who are the big traffickers, the importers, or are we sweeping individuals who need our help, who need treatment, who are being caught up in this and increasing penalties for them? And so I vote no today, but it is not because I don't understand the intent and the importance of what you're trying to do.
Representative Lewis,
Yes.
Representative Maddox,
Yes.
Representative McCoy,
Yes.
Representative Minter,
Pass.
Representative Mosier,
Explain my vote quickly. So I am going to vote yes on this bill. I want to make sure that the intent is specifically targeted at traffickers. And so I think there are some ways to clean up some of the outstanding questions about whether or not this really gets to the traffickers. In Section 2, the amounts of fentanyl, carfentanil, and any analogs, I think it should be separate, the 1 gram per. And then perhaps strike Section 2, Sub 2, where the cumulative results or cumulative quantities are specified. And then, I don't know, can we mandate treatment during incarceration? I mean, I think that there are still some things that we could talk about. And I know that there's a bill coming over from the Senate, so maybe we have room to talk. But I'm a yes today.
Representative Nemes,
Yes.
Representative Petrie,
Yes.
Representative Scott,
No.
Representative Stevenson,
No, and I'd like to explain my vote. I really appreciate the work. I want traffickers to be caught too, but I'm really concerned that we're just putting more youth in jail from passing one pill to another, and they don't even know what they're passing. And so we're punishing users. So I agree with Rep. Mosier that we need to tighten this up and go after the big guys.
Chairman Massey.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Here today.
Representative Massey, you're clear to go. Introduce your guests.
Yes, I'm Representative Massey from District 66 in Boone County. We're talking today about House Bill 311. This is a felony mediation bill. And I have with me here today, to my right, Jennifer Hancock from Volunteers of America. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
You got it right.
All right. And she's going to briefly chime in as well. So I'm going to start and move this quickly. So this bill is basically
Do you have a sub, sir? Motion on the sub from Blanton and a second from Nemes. Go ahead. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Proceed.
So the good thing about this bill is that the felony mediation process is already going on. In fact, AOC is funding it, and we have some retired judges and other folks that are conducting these mediations as a way to help with docket control and as a way for people to have conflict resolution without the cost, expense, and the burden mentally and emotionally of going through a full-blown trial.
We have a motion on the bill from Representative McCoy and a second from Representative Heverin. All in favor. Would you call the roll, please?
Well, do we have any time for questions?
Do we have any questions? I'm
have one
sorry,
here.
I'm not recognizing my roommate. We're in a hurry here.
Representative Cantrell, I think it's a question.
Okay. Representative Cantrell.
Thank you. I'd like to hear the rest of the chair's presentation. You've worked really hard on this. There's a lot of new language in here, and you have a guest. And I know we're pressed for time, but
It'll be brief.
thanks.
So to continue on very quickly, it's already going on. It's used in courts already. I've used it. It allows parties. Now, here's the catch. The defendant, first of all, the defendant has to agree. The Commonwealth attorney in consultation with the victim has to agree. And then the judge has to sign off on it. We think there's going to be possibly a change. We want to make sure we're in compliance with Marcy's law, which is already passed, to make sure that the input from the victims is recognized and that all parties are on board with respect to this mediation. What it does then in the prior bill, and the reason there's a committee sub, we had specified all of the regulations and the things that go with the mediation, but we determined that because it's going on, we need to leave that to the Supreme Court since they're already acting on that, and they need to promulgate the regulations, guidelines, operational techniques, training for judges, etc. And that's really in their domain. So they're going to do that, and then part of the sub also was to require that they report back to the General Assembly about their progress in doing that. One thing I was made aware of that's very important for the committee to know, and I learned this from one of the people doing mediation, is that we're the recipients of a national grant, and they're actually looking at our felony mediation program to be the model language for the nation for felony mediation. So this is just a way for parties, if they're in agreement to do so, to resolve their issues in criminal court. Do you have anything you want to add?
I do, if I can have just a couple of moments, because at Volunteers of America, we support the issues at the heart of this bill. One of our essential missions is to find alternatives to incarceration that hold individuals accountable for their actions while staying safely in the community. And I'm talking about our restorative justice program that accomplishes this goal of reducing recidivism, saving taxpayer dollars, honoring and respecting the needs and wishes of victims, and putting people back on productive paths. It adds more accountability to our criminal justice process because it is highly personalized, and after 12 years of consistent data, it is clear that having to directly face the person you have harmed is more effective in curbing future criminal activity than facing an impersonal and sanitized criminal justice system. Our mission at VOA is also to help men, women, and families overcome substance use disorder. This is the right way to help families and communities become healthier and more productive. And it's also the right policy direction for our criminal justice system. Our prisons and jails are overcrowded, chronically over capacity. And the primary driver of this is the incarceration of low-level drug offenders. Non-violent drug and property offenses account for more than 50% of people incarcerated in Kentucky. This is an issue we're all aware of and we're working to confront, but it continues to be a budget drain and a threat to the prosperity for our Commonwealth. And at VOA, our mission is to move people from substance use disorder to the workforce, and this actually can help achieve that. Every aspect of our mission is compatible with the goals of this bill, and it's our hope that the Supreme Court will ensure that mediators are properly trained on the restorative model. It's an evidence-based and structured way to ensure the victim is empowered to influence what kind of justice is served through a collaborative, developed plan of restoration. It is customized both to the offender and to the offense. We offer a 32-hour training for all of our conflict resolution specialists who are able to facilitate the restorative process and welcome the opportunity to be a partner on this. My colleagues at the Kentucky Association of Sexual Assault Programs and I hope that this bill will be further enhanced by adding sexual assault, stalking, and dating violence in addition to domestic violence and abuse. Here's why. We must ensure that victims are not further traumatized by these highly personal crimes. Assuming the bill can be enhanced in this way, it is a common sense approach that provides a path for victim healing and empowerment and supports community safety. Our Commonwealth has among the lowest labor force participation rates in our nation, the 6th lowest. We also have some of the highest rates of incarceration, the 6th highest. This is not a coincidence, these two rankings. They go hand in hand. I just want to mention that our immediate past circuit court judge chief in Jefferson County, Judge Angela Bissick, who also serves on the board of VOA, is a leading proponent of restorative justice. And she says with conviction, I do not get reelected by being soft on crime. The best way to be tough on crime is to implement solutions that stop crime from happening again. And that is what restorative justice and mediation are designed to do. Without a doubt, this is not a soft on crime approach. So with that, I know we're running short on time. I want you to know that we are pleased to support this bill, assuming that it can have those enhancements and work as a model for better, smarter, and a more prosperous path forward. Thank you.
Okay, so far we have one question. Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for this bill. This is a great piece of legislation. I love the whole concept of restorative justice, especially in the juvenile population. I think it's very common sense. It's a teachable moment for folks who are young and see themselves getting into trouble, and I think it's a great technique to keep those folks out of future problems. So, can you talk just briefly about some of the pilots that you have going on through the state on restorative justice?
Sure, and thank you for that question.
How those are going?
In Jefferson County, we have expanded into 3 circuit courts. We're in district courts. We're now in 3 circuit courts. And we've moved out of the judicial system into the school system. So we're now working collaboratively with JCPS and a pilot that is privately funded. This General Assembly 2 years ago opted to fund a pilot in Southeast Kentucky, recognizing the need to get some additional data outside of an urban core. So we're now in 8 southeastern Kentucky counties. We have a researcher from Eastern Kentucky University that is measuring the results, watching recidivism rates, ensuring that this program is just as successful there as it has been in Jefferson County. Our goal is to bring it to Northern Kentucky next. We believe it's critically important that we continue to track this data. For 12 years in Jefferson County, the data has been clear and convincing. Not only does this reduce recidivism by more than half when compared to the traditional process of the justice system, it's literally 1/3 the taxpayer costs. So it is a better, more effective solution that saves taxpayer dollars. Thank you for your question.
Any other questions? Okay, please call the roll.
Representative Banta,
Yes.
Representative Blanton,
Aye.
Representative Bratcher,
Yes.
Representative Cantrell,
Yes, and I want to be clear that I want this bill to similarly expand to exempt sexual assault, domestic stalking, and dating violence. So as long as that happens, I will continue to be a yes, but that does need to happen.
Representative Decker,
Yes.
Representative Elliott, Representative Fisher,
Yes.
Representative Hebron,
Yes.
Representative Kulkarni,
Yes.
Representative Lewis,
Yes.
Representative Maddox,
Yes.
Representative McCoy,
Yes.
Representative Minter,
Yes.
Representative Mosier,
Yes.
Representative Nemus,
Yes.
Representative Petrie, Representative Scott,
Pass.
Representative Stevenson,
Yes.
Chairman Massey.
Yes. Thank you. I got one more.
With 1 pass and 17 yes votes, this should move favorably in the House. Thank you, Representative Massey.
I have one more.
No, you're done.
Well, thank you.
Please proceed.
This may be the shortest bill I ever have. I've just been reprimanded by my vice chair. This is House Bill 458. All this bill does is there's currently in effect a Department of Juvenile Justice Oversight Committee that's set to expire, I believe, in May. You heard the interim discussion on Department of Juvenile Justice this summer. All this bill does is continue the Oversight Committee. That's all it does.
Second.
We have a motion on the bill by Representative McCoy and a question from was there a second? Representative Hebron was our second. We have a question from Representative Nemus. Oh, called a question. I'm sorry. I thought you said question. Okay. Okay. So are there any questions? All right. Can you please take?
Representative Banta,
Yes.
Representative Blanton, Representative Bratcher,
Yes.
Representative Cantrell, Representative Decker,
Yes.
Representative Elliott, Representative Fisher,
Yes.
Representative Hebron,
Yes.
Representative Kulkarni,
Yes.
Representative Lewis,
Yes.
Representative Maddox,
Yes.
Representative McCoy,
Yes.
Representative Minter,
Yes.
Representative Mosier,
Yes.
Representative Nemus,
Yes.
Representative Petrie, Representative Scott,
Yes.
Representative Stevenson,
Yes.
Chairman Massey.
Yes.
Okay. With 17 yes votes and no votes, should pass favorably on the floor. Thank you.
We're going to move right along. I told you that would be the quickest one that I do. We're going to move along to 319. This is sponsored by Representative Dotson. The good news is there is not a committee sub, so you may proceed quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is I'm Representative Ryan Dotson of the 73rd House District.
And Representative Walker Thomas, District 8. And what we found about this bill, sometimes a really good bill that we presented in 2020 and it passed just needs a new quarterback. So
got a little ahead of myself there, but I want to thank the members here for allowing me to bring this bill forward. This is a great, strong bipartisan measure. For 3 decades, research has focused at the link between domestic violence and pet abuse. And that is the focus here, is using a pet to coerce a victim. But 3 decades of research has shown that abusive households often contains more than one victim, and that an abuser is likely to harm an intimate partner, a dependent senior, a vulnerable child, and a domestic pet. Acknowledgement of these findings has resulted in efforts to act upon this link to protect both humans and domestic pets. Until now, very little attention has been paid to the intentional abuse of pets as a method of domestic violence. Our statutes need to include pet cruelty as a domestic violence offense when it's committed with the purpose of harming, intimidating, punishing, or coercing the human victim. Failure to...
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the bill and a second. Any questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Banta.
Aye.
Representative Blanton. Representative Bratcher.
Yes.
Representative Cantrell. Yes. Representative Decker.
Yes.
Representative Elliott. Representative Fisher.
Yes.
Representative Hebron.
Yes.
Representative Kulkarni.
Yes.
Representative Lewis.
Yes.
Representative Maddox.
Yes.
Representative McCoy.
Yes.
Representative Minter. Representative Mosier.
Yes.
Representative Nemus.
Yes.
Representative Petrie. Representative Scott.
Yes.
Representative Stevenson.
Yes.
Chairman Massey.
Yes. There being 16 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 0 pass, this will be reported with favorable expression. The same would pass. Very good. Thank you for being quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee.
Now that brings us to our last bill, and we're going to try to give it the due attention it needs, and that's get to my next page, so get the right bill number. That is House Bill 290, which is a matter regarding student rights. This was brought previously, that's sponsored by Representative Banta. And while she's making her way, there is a committee substitute on this bill.
Motion on the sub.
We have a motion by Representative Nemus. Is there a second? Second by Representative Fisher. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? There's none. With that, Representative Banta, it's your show.
Thank you, Representative Massey and committee, for listening to us again. You may have heard this before. Today, I'm going to kind of let students speak to this bill. It is simply a due process bill that students would go through in college before they are suspended or expelled. It's, I thought, a very easy bill, not so easy. I did, just for your information, there's a bulleted point at the back of your bill. I'm not going to read to you because I know for fact most of you can read very well, so I'm going to let you take a look at that. But the important thing that I want you to know is I've worked very, very hard to be inclusive with the universities and to meet all their demands. The final demand that I could not meet with the University of Louisville was removing the right to have representation. I moved on every single point except for that one, because why would we do that? So with that said, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves and let them speak. Thank you.
Liam Gallagher from the University of Louisville.
Julia Mattingly, University of Louisville.
Thank you to Chairman Massey and all the members of the Judiciary Committee for allowing me to speak today on this matter. I would first like to clarify that I'm speaking in my role as a private citizen and that my statement does not reflect the position of my university. I'm a junior studying rural health at the University of Louisville, where I serve as a speaker of the SGA Senate and president of the University Young Democrats. I'm here today to speak in support of House Bill 290, the Kentucky Campus Due Process Protection Act. I support this bill because I believe Kentucky universities putting their students first and ensuring them proper due process rights is long overdue. This became extremely apparent to me this past summer when I was subject to pervasive harassment and defamation by another U of L student. When I had sought out the Dean of Students' office for help, university attorneys reviewed my case and determined that my allegations did not rise to a violation of the Student Code of Conduct. A representative from the Dean of Students informed me that I could file a formal complaint and receive a conduct hearing. However, they told me I would have to act as my own attorney by collecting affidavits from all those involved and preparing an oral argument to be presented to the board. As an undergraduate rural health major who has absolutely no legal experience, I was shocked at the notion that I was to represent myself at the hearing and was not allowed to seek help from legal counsel. Additionally, I was scared to be in the same room as the student who had been harassing me all summer and would have appreciated the ability to have legal counsel speak on my behalf. House Bill 290 addresses this exact issue. This bill requires universities to notify students of their right to be represented by counsel or, if required by Title IX, an advisor at each phase of the investigation process. Allowing students due process should not be burdensome for Kentucky universities. Due process for students is a guarantee of fairness, a core tenet of our country and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. This legislation does not hinder a university's ability to hold students accountable for offenses. It simply asks that students are afforded the same due process rights on campus as they would be off campus. I would like to thank Representatives Banta and Moser, Chairman Massey, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and the Kentucky Student Rights Coalition for allowing me to speak in support of this bill, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time. Thank you.
All right, go ahead and proceed. We'll do questions at the end.
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you, Chairman Massey and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Liam Gallagher. I'm a sophomore political science student at the University of Louisville. I'm a student senator for the College of Arts and Sciences, and I am chairman of the University of Louisville College Republicans. Out of fear of retaliation due to a letter sent out by the University of Louisville earlier this week, I am to faculty and staff. I am required to say that I am here in my capacity as a private citizen and not as a representative of the University of Louisville. I am here today to support House Bill 290 because Kentucky's public colleges and universities have a broad, unchecked power that fails to afford sufficient due process rights to students. House Bill 290 is not a wildly radical bill that will change the way that we educate students. Instead, it is a bill that merely gives due process rights that we would expect from any and all government institutions. This bill does not make the job of universities more difficult. It does not impede public universities' ability to discipline students. The rights currently set out for students at our public institutions in the Commonwealth of Kentucky are inconsistent from one another, and they vary from student to student depending on who sits in the chair. This bill sets a standard that public colleges and universities would be required to follow. I do not want to sit here and bore you with the fine details of the bill, since I'm sure you've heard about them and will hear about them later. But I would like to say that every bill or every right that is within House Bill 290 is a uniquely and fundamentally American right. These are rights that we would not dream of taking away from everyday American citizens. Yet state law fails to afford these rights to our very best and brightest. Kentucky's public colleges and universities are one of the shining gems of our Commonwealth, but they can and do need to do better. My university, the University of Louisville, teaches about due process rights. We teach about equality and justice for all, yet we fight every day to keep these rights away from our own students. What we are looking at here is not some small disagreement between a university and its students, but we're looking at a government institution reigning supreme over students with little to no due process protections in state law. And that's a scary precedent. Not only is that scary, but it's more scary when that very government institution is fighting tooth and nail to keep it the way it is.
Second.
We have a motion on the bill by Representative Heverin, a second by Representative Nemus. I know we have a couple questions. I also know that there were some other folks here that might want to very, very briefly express.
I want to know what that letter is he's talking about.
But we'll start with the questions and then we'll see if we're on time. So, Representative Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We discussed this bill last year and in this committee, and I talked about some of my concerns, and those concerns, I used this example, and last year it felt like kind of an extreme example because it was talking about, very serious allegations where someone had been arrested and, whether they were incarcerated and they would still continue to be a student of the university because they would not have gotten out of jail in time to have this due process hearing and the process that this bill sets up. Now I feel like this situation is not that far-fetched because this week in Louisville, we've had an individual arrested, a 21-year-old who's been associated. I don't know if this person is currently associated with the University of Louisville, but we had a 21-year-old at least who has been associated in the past with the University of Louisville who's been arrested on attempted murder charges, and it's been all in the news that this person is associated with the University of Louisville. And if that person is currently associated with the University of Louisville, this person is incarcerated with a very high bond and would still continue to be associated with the University of Louisville under this bill because they would not have had the chance to go through this process, because they would not have had a chance to be there in person and participate in the process. And that's not good for the university. It's not good for this person's name to continue to be associated with the university in news articles when they're facing very serious charges that have rocked our community. Does this bill's changed, we have a committee sub. Do you have any answers to how we deal with this in Louisville right now?
Well, we kind of left out crimes because that's something that, the university shouldn't have to deal with. I don't know what university policies are when you're incarcerated or for attempted murder, because that would just go through the criminal process. So I would assume the university would fall back on whatever their process is for attempted murder. I mean, that's a violent crime. That isn't what we're talking about really with this bill.
So you do not think that individual would be subject to the due process outlined in this bill?
No, I think they gave that up when they tried to shoot somebody. That's a violent crime, and that's not. Do we have an attorney somewhere? I think that they would have to.
What I would say is, why should they look? I don't know about this individual. I assume he's guilty. He's got witness. But I think we need to be careful on making policy broadly because of this particular attempted assassination, because we have people who are acquitted or charged of crimes all the time that didn't commit them, and they shouldn't lose government benefits, whether they're benefits for various programs or being at the university, just because they were charged with a crime. So why shouldn't this apply to that situation?
I wouldn't think that, and just from a legal perspective, I agree. I wouldn't think that they wouldn't have those same rights. That's more of an administrative policy. Obviously, the criminal matter is going to take precedence, and he's going to go through that criminal system. And whether he's found guilty or not, once that's over, then the administrative matter would kick in. And certainly if he went before the university and was trying to still be a student or whatever, he would have the right to representation, just like anyone would. I think that's one of the things that the bill is trying to clear up, is that when students are going through hearings of an administrative type nature, that they're able to be represented by counsel so they're not at an unfair advantage when they're dealing with administrative faculty or people that have much more knowledge about the circumstances than they do. Any other questions? Okay, I will say this. I know how hard Representative Banta has worked on this because I was in multiple meetings last year and in several this year, and that's why you see all the university people coming in and out of this building, is because they have been repetitively coming in here to meet with her. With that being said, we've got just a couple minutes. I'm going to give the other people just a moment if they want to say something very brief. We have with us, and they did sign up, Tyler Coward on the monitor, I believe.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I will be very brief. I know you're on a time constraint. My name is Tyler Coward. I'm the Senior Legislative Counsel, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, or FIRE. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting free speech and due process rights for students and faculty on college campuses. Due to time considerations, all I will say is FIRE supports this bill. Been very happy to work both with Representative Banta and you, Mr. Chairman, on this bill, and I'm very happy to see we think it's a very good spot right now. With regard to the issues of arrest, certainly if an individual is incarcerated and unable to make it to classes, there are attendance issues. There are ways that universities can deal with this while somebody is incarcerated. And I think that when the person, if a person is unable to attend class because of those issues, the institution would be able to deal with that under an academic sort of framework, as opposed to punishing that person for an alleged crime. And if and when that individual is out of incarceration, may be able to have their case with the institution handled once they are no longer incarcerated.
Thank you very much. Michael Frazier is here with us today. Michael, do you want to say something very briefly?
Sure. I'll just keep this extremely brief. My name is Michael Frazier. One of the many hats I wear is the executive director for the Kentucky Student Rights Coalition. Our organization comprises of 64 student organizations across Kentucky, those who are from across the political ideology, advocacy organizations on campus, and we are happy to support this bill. I cannot express how much I appreciate our students, our many students who went through revision processes, talked to legislators. Some of you all have seen them here at the legislature advocating, and I want to express my thanks to Representative Banta, Representative Mosher, Representative Bratcher, who originally brought it in 2020, and all the co-sponsors of this bill. Thank you for supporting students.
All right, the only other one I have on my list is Braden Hood. Is Braden here? That's the last one I have on my list, so.
There's a button. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for hearing me. I will keep this extremely brief. My name is Braden Hood. I'm a student at the University of Kentucky. I'm president of the Young Americans for Freedom chapter at the university and a member of the UK Student Coalition. Our Young Americans for Freedom chapter has been on national news on 2 occasions, most notably a couple years ago when we had the opportunity to expose racial segregation training in the resident advisor program in the residence halls at the university. It's my intention to fully support HB 290, as I believe it is invaluable due to my own experience with due process at the university just last semester. Had an experience last semester where later on in the semester, probably around October, I found out that I was in disciplinary action with the university for failure to comply with the masking policy. I did not learn about this until 2 months after the instance had happened, where I briefly walked into my residence hall with my mask below my nose. And so due to that, I was unable to register for classes the next semester, and it was, thank God that I found out that I was in disciplinary holding because I only had 2 weeks left to register for said classes. I never received an email from the university about this, and so when I went to go check my student account, it told me to call this number to figure out how I could get the hold lifted. Well, in talking to them on the phone, apparently there had been a hearing held about my case that I was not invited to. Not that I would have necessarily wanted to go anyways, because I shouldn't have ever been in that position. And I was not giving me a chance to appeal. So they deemed punishment as in the form of a 1,000-word essay on why UK's masking policy is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So that pretty much sums it up. I had to write the essay, 1,000 words in the middle of a semester, while dealing with a few other important things, as a college student does, in order to be able to register for classes and attend my final semester of my senior year, which is this semester. So I think if that is the way that we're handling minor offenses like failure to mask, which, by the way, is those punishments, at least this semester, are dished out very selectively. Not many people will still follow the policy. I would hate to see what is happening to students who are accused of much worse academic offenses. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. That brings us to, we have a motion on the bill and a second. And seeing no further questions, so Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representative Bantha. Yes. Representative Blanton. Representative Brotcher.
Yes, and I'd like to thank Michael for. I've been down there a long time. I don't think I've seen somebody just keep coming back and chipping away at it. So keep going, man. Maybe this thing will pass one day.
Representative Cantrell. Representative Decker.
Yes.
Representative Elliott. Representative Fisher.
Yes.
Representative Heverin.
Yes.
Representative Cole Carney.
I'm a pass for today.
Representative Lewis.
Yes.
Representative Maddox.
Mr. Chairman, may I briefly explain my vote? Yes. Representative Bana, I want to thank you for bringing this measure. I think it's very important. And I also want to thank the lady and gentleman who had the courage to speak up in committee today. I had an opportunity to review the letter that was sent from the University of Louisville, and I was kind of taken aback at the chilling effect that could have for an individual's ability to come testify in committee or to speak out in favor of legislation. And lastly, I want to thank you, Michael, for everything that you have done and your hard work on this. It's very much appreciated. And I vote yes. Thank you.
Representative McCoy.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to vote yes, but I want us all to be clear here. The Constitution is an agreement between you and your government. The Constitution says if the government tries to deprive you of life, liberty, or property, then you have due process rights. You do not have the right to public secondary education. This is not a constitutional right. We are creating something we're calling due process, but it is not constitutional due process. I don't really like what we're doing. I understand it. I know a lot of work's been involved in it. Like I said, I'm a yes, but I really wish we would quit conflating the Constitution with I wish I had a right. Because if you're going to have a right, then you're going to have a remedy. And I don't think people are always ready to deal with remedies when we start talking about rights. Thank you.
Representative Minter. Representative Mosier.
I'd like to briefly explain my yes vote. Thank you, Michael, for your work on this. You are one of the most tenacious and persistent individuals I've ever met, and that is a high compliment. Thank you, Representative Banta, for your work on this. And I want to also thank all of the students who have come today to explain why this is so necessary. And I do think that this is a remedy. Certainly appreciate the comments from my colleagues, but I am a yes. Thank you.
Representative Nemes.
Yes.
Representative Petrie. Representative Scott. Representative Stevenson. Chairman Massey.
Yes. There being 11 yes votes, 0 no votes, and 2 pass votes, this is reported with favorable expression that the same should pass. Thank you, gentlemen. I know everybody's eager to get over to session, so without further ado, this meeting is adjourned.